Welcome to TMG again, not quite live. Glad to be on here with you guys again. Hey, today we're talking about an important topic, something that comes up from time to time, should come up more often than it does, and it's this idea of assimilation. Assimilation is a word like discipleship, like outreach, like a lot of things that we say but don't ever actually define what we mean by it. So I would guess that for most of us, assimilation simply means the series of contacts that we have with a guest after they've visited for the first time. But that's not what assimilation means at all. If anybody's watched a Star Trek movie, like The Borg talks about you will be assimilated. Are you a Star Trek fan there, AJ?
No, sorry.
I'm really not either, but I know this about them. The idea of assimilated is it that you've become a part, like you are a part.
Yeah.
So the idea of assimilation in the church is that what does it take for someone to go from just attending to engaged, to really becoming a part? And at the macro level, you might say, well, we have a discipleship pathway, these series of things these ways that we want people to engage in our church.
Which the function of the discipleship pathway is more so for people to grow in their faith, become more mature believers.
Right.
That's not necessarily the function of an assimilation path.
Correct. The assimilation process is about getting people to go from maybe whatever that first step is on your discipleship pathway, which is usually something centered around worship or like
large group function. Yeah.
Yeah. To that next step, like truly engaging. So the assimilation process is really about tracking those micro steps between getting someone from a big room to a small room, to get them to move from the living room to the dining room, right? Just to get them headed in the right direction so you don't have this mass of people who attend on Sundays but are not engaged, or worse, people who come for a couple of times but never do anything else and they never even come back to Sunday morning, which happens a lot. Yeah. So there's three things I want to talk about. And the first one is it's important for your church to decide and to define at what point, because it's going to be different from church to church, at what point is a person in our church assimilated? Like, what invisible line do they need to cross to go from being sort of new and surfacey to active and engaged?
Yeah.
What is that step? Is it when they join a group? Is it when they after they've taken a membership class? Like, what is that final step that you want them to take when you'd say, now they're really into the pathway? They're not just in that, top of the funnel, high level thing, the catch-all program, right?
Yeah.
So it's important to first define, when we say assimilated at Backroad Baptist Church, what exactly do we mean by that? And what is that win for us? Does that make sense, AJ?
Yeah, for sure. Which, hey, by the way, my name's AJ. His name is Scott. So we don't really do that closer to the beginning. But
on the screen, right?
Yeah, there's our names somewhere over there.
Did those go away?
Yeah, there you go. That was our introduction.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
long intro.
And we don't want to get hung up on. We want to measure people in an introduction process, and we should, first of all, have an introduction process. We're communicating with people who have visited the church. We don't want to get hung up on that. The goal is to get them assimilated into participating in what the church does. So, so having but we just don't have to have measurements along the way.
Which goes to number 2, AJ, which is you need to track progress and see where different people are at. So I would say that the vast majority of churches, there's going to be exceptions, and maybe if you're watching, maybe you're one. But for the vast majority of churches, they are sending out emails or postcards or letters to people who are new at the church, to guests at the church, almost indiscriminately, like not really tracking what then happens after that. That might be the only thing that they ever do. People come to a trunk or treat event, you send them some sort of a follow-up. Did they ever come back? We don't know.
Right. Yeah.
And that's not good. I mean, if our goal is to make and mature disciples, might be worthwhile to know who's here, who's come back, who's not come back.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, we need some sort of, I mean, it's 2019 technology that is going to allow us to track these things. So yeah, maybe they were visited on Easter. We have, begun a follow-up process with them. They then showed up at our guest lunch 2 weeks later. Somebody needs to be in charge of figuring out who's at the guest lunch, and then going back and updating this list of people and say, okay, we've got a check mark now next to guest lunch for, Joe and Suzanne. And then when they, attend a Sunday school class for the first time, the Sunday school class leader has, taken some kind of role or attendance or figured out who's in the room. And that information has now gotten back to the person that has the newcomer database, and they put a check mark now next to Sunday school class. So
that's it. And but better than that would be to not just track it, to be intentional about sort of laying the breadcrumbs for people to take those steps. So I would say that's what happens at most churches, is that, okay, we've got this welcome series of communication, and then they might show up to a newcomer event, assuming we even have one. And then after that, they may or may not join a group or a Sunday school class or whatever. And we may or may not track that, but it's almost like happenstance. Yeah. And what I'm suggesting is that in an assimilation process, you can actually grease the wheels. You can put the trail of breadcrumbs. You can make it easier for people to take their next best step.
Yeah.
And which leads to point number 3. We only have 3 points. This is going to be quick today, but you want to identify the bottleneck. So if you know what it is for someone to be assimilated, it's when they've completed a membership class, or it's when they've joined a group, or it's when they've started serving in an area. Like, you are going to know what that is. We don't want to tell you what it is because it's going to be different for every church. But once you've defined that, then you can start tracking new people as they come in. Where are they at in the process? How close are they to taking that step? Okay, now let's create a series of micro steps. So they're new, they're going to attend a newcomer event, then they're going to get invited to the membership class, and then they're going to join a group, whatever that might be, right? You can identify the bottleneck if you start tracking people. So people are coming to the newcomer event, but they're not going to the membership class, or they're coming to the membership class, but they're not joining a group. Like, where is the breakdown in the process? We're sending them a welcome series of communication, but they're not coming to the newcomer event. Like, wherever that is, the minute you start tracking it, the easier it becomes to identify where people are getting stuck.
Yeah.
Once you know where people are getting stuck, you can know how to start figuring out why they're getting stuck, and you can keep moving them along. This might sound ridiculous or like a lot of work, but again, if our goal is to make and mature disciples, we have a responsibility to know, why are people not moving from one step to the next?
Right.
Like don't just chalk it off as, well, that's a lot of work. It's meaningful. It's the most important thing you could possibly be doing.
You can't claim that you care about this stuff if you're not willing to put in this level of effort, in my opinion, to track how people are doing and make your best effort to move them along. Maybe that's harsh. I don't know.
I don't think it's harsh at all.
This also affects how we communicate. I mean, we don't want to keep throwing the same blanket email or letter to people regardless of where they are in our assimilation process. We should be communicating differently and specifically with people depending on where they are and what level of engagement they've displayed thus far.
That's right.
It's not easy. I guess no one ever said it would be, but
it's not easy. But so let's briefly talk about a couple of ways that a church could do this with no money. All right, like they got no cash to it. That's like, some people might assume, well, this sounds expensive. It's not. Okay, so here are 2 ways to do it. I'm going to give you an in real life way to do it, and I'll give you a digital way to do it. Let's start with a digital way. Open up Excel, or if you don't have Excel on your computer, Google Docs, Google Sheets. That's free. You can create a spreadsheet and make 4 columns or 3 columns, whatever the number of steps are that you have, and start listing under each column the people who are in that step. Step 1, welcome series. All right, Scott Ball, AJ Matthew, Joe Blow, Susan Smith. These are the people who are in that step. When someone goes to the next step, they go to the newcomer event. You move Scott Ball's name from welcome series to now they're under attended the newcomer event. Whenever Scott Ball makes that next step, you move their name over. It's not glamorous, but you would at least have a list of names, and assuming you have a database somewhere else with more of their contact information.
Yeah.
Like that is a free way you could do it. Another free way you could do it is to set up in your office a whiteboard, assuming you have one. If not, you could even just do it on the wall, kind of map out an area with some painter's tape and map out your steps. And when there's a new person, you can tape up on the wall. I'd encourage you not to use a Post-it note because those lose their stickiness, but kind of literally like move a person along. That's called Kanban, but where you can move a card from one place to the next. Or if it's a cork board, which cork board's really cheap, you could use like a push pin.
Yeah.
And you can literally move them along. But I'm telling you, it's very powerful to visually see where people are at in your process.
Hey, you've automatically got a prayer list on your wall then at that point.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be cool to have your staff team or you and your secretary just pray over those names every week?
Yeah, and if you're a solo pastor, you and your board, like when you have your elder board meeting or deacon board meeting, to be able to look at that and go, it's going to be glaring. You go, oh my goodness, we've got a lot of people who are here and they're not moving to that next step. Like that's going to, you won't be able to ignore the problem if you start tracking the progress. That's like, if there's one thing I want you to take away from this ridiculous conversation, it's visualize where people are at in going from step one to step two. If you can do that well, your church is going to be appreciably better.
Yeah.
Like if you forget everything else that you could ever learn, if you could do that well, move people from step one to step two, you're going to be in a completely different situation.
You should be able at whatever size level you're at. If you're a solo pastor church and that's what size church you are, maybe you're 120 people a week or 100 or less, you're proportionally probably getting fewer guests. You probably would have the capacity to be able to put a face with a name. If you look at that wall and there's 8 people on the wall, you should know after 1 or 2 of those steps what those people look like when you look at that name. If you're bigger than that, you probably have another level of staff, somebody on staff, some other staff pastor or person that, handles that should be able to picture what those people look like. If you're not able to do that, you're probably not engaged at a deep enough level with the people that are new to the church.
When it's hard when you have someone who's brand new, but as soon as they're connected,
that's what I'm saying. After a couple, if they've hit a couple of these steps, there should have been.
Then you're really going to know.
Where you go, you know what? I remember what Bob and Susie look like.
That's right.
Seen them at 2 things.
What happens, and this is perfectly normal, but what happens is if you don't put something like this visually in front of you, you'll forget. You'll be like, oh, I forgot that Bob and Susie ever came. Like you won't remember.
Yeah.
So the big takeaway for today, we're going to wrap this up. So this is a quick session today, is that don't assume assimilation just means sending out a series of emails or whatever. Like that's not assimilation. That's a part of the process, but that in and of itself is not assimilation. You need to define, when is someone assimilated? What key step do they need to take for you to go, all right, they're engaged now with our church, and it's going to be different for every church. Number 2, track the progress so you can see where people are at. And it's not that hard to do. Again, if you're a small church, when someone comes to your church and they fill out a Connect card, like take the Connect card and just use the Connect card and pin that thing to a cork board and move the actual Connect card along. It could be that simple, but you need to start tracking where people are at, moving them along when they take a next step so that you can identify bottlenecks if you have any and make sure you're actually moving people along. Like that will revolutionize your church, I promise. It really, really will. And too few churches are doing it, even big ones. You might go, well, a big church probably does really well at that. Not necessarily. They might just have volume on their side. they're getting more guests. So
Yeah, right.
statistically, they're maybe not doing any better than you are, but they just get more guests.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, it's not about growing your church to make it big. It's about making and maturing disciples. That's it. That's what we care about.
Absolutely.
You can see it there on AJ's microphone. #make disciples.
Boom.
Yeah. All right, guys. We love you. We care about you. We want to see your church be healthy so that you can see healthy, sustainable growth and making and maturing disciples. And we're here for you if you need us.
Yeah, reach out. We'd love to hear from you. You can certainly comment below, and we would be glad to answer your questions. We'll be back again next Tuesday, live or maybe not, but probably this video would at least be
next Tuesday's our webinar.
Oh, that's right. Next Tuesday's webinar day.
Church Revitalization, intro to church revitalization. We'd love to have you register for that. It's going to be really good. And our giveaway for that, our freebie, is something that we are still working on. It's so big that we can't just throw it together.
It's not done yet.
Is that a good teaser?
Yeah, you're going to love it. Be here.
You're going to love it. It's big. It's huge. Huge freebie. Excited about it.
All right. Hey, thanks, Scott. It was great chatting with you. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We will see you next week.
See ya.